Hello and welcome, everyone. It is day 3 of the Osmompreneur Online Festival. My name is Peace Mitchell, and I'm co founder of Osmompreneur, the Women's Business School, and Women Changing the World Press. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Mamu people of the land that I work on and live on. I'd also like to pay my respects to the traditional owners, past, present, and emerging, right across Australia and the Torres Strait. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our next guest presenter, Nicole Holton. Welcome, Nicole. How are you?
I am really well. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. I'm going to hand over to you now for your presentation, and we'll take questions at the end if time permits.
Beautiful. Okay, so hi everyone. I am Nicole. I'm going to share my screen with you. I'm just going to pop it open now. Hopefully it'll do the things that I want it to do, because that's always the tricky part, getting things to do what we want. I believe we have this one here, and hold tight. There we go, and hopefully we're in business. Okay, so this morning I have the pleasure of talking to you about the importance of the early years in changing the world. Now, it probably seems like a strange topic for some people to be thinking about. Perhaps you're not, maybe you don't have children, maybe you don't work with children, maybe you have very little to do with children. But I can guarantee that everyone everywhere actually has an important role to play when it comes to children and what we do with children and how we respond to children and how we interact with children, how we support children, how we support people who have children. There are so many elements that I think are really important, particularly as women in business. I think there's so much that we need to be mindful of. And so I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about the importance of the early years, but also about what we can do, particularly as business owners, to support children to change the world as well. So I'll just see if I can, so Peace has obviously done a beautiful acknowledgement. I'd just also like to acknowledge the Awabakal people. That's the land that I'm on today in the beautiful Lake Macquarie area of New South Wales. And I'd just like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Okay, so who are we? So originally there was supposed to be 2 of us. So this is my business partner, Tash, and I. We've worked together now for, I think, about 18 years. And when we originally started working together, we worked together in a not-for-profit community-based preschool. So we worked with children aged between 2 and 6. And we worked together there for a number of years before we decided to start our own business. And we did the same. We worked in the preschool together and we worked in our business together. And so we've been doing that for 13 years. So our business is called Inspired EC, and we're predominantly a training and consultancy company, and we work with early childhood educators and service providers all throughout Australia. So we work with preschools, we work with childcare services, we work with out of school hours, we work with family daycare, nature-based programs, all sorts of programs. Essentially anyone who's working with children in the birth to 6 kind of age range, and even a little bit beyond that, tends to be our target client base, I guess. And so we essentially started doing what we did and what we do now because of a need in the sector. There was a need for high quality professional learning, and it wasn't necessarily that we felt we were the ones that had to provide it, but we wanted to help make the connections. We wanted to bring really high quality speakers from other countries, other parts of the world into Australia to inspire early educators. So that was kind of how we began, and then it's evolved from there. What we do now is probably quite different to when we first started. We still do a lot of training and consultancy with services, but a lot of what we do is also in our service provision. So we, in 2014, we set up some family daycare services in New South Wales, Victoria, ACT, and Queensland. I have to think of the last one there. And so we set up family daycare services. And the reason we did that was because there was, again, a need in the sector for care that enabled children to have the same sort of experiences they would have at home, but also that enabled them to do something a little bit different. So we're very nature-based. We're happy for children to take risks in their play, to do things a little bit out of the ordinary, I suppose. So that's kind of where we come from with that. In 2017, 2018, we started the first Timbernook program in Australia. So it's called Timbernook Newcastle. Timbernook's an international program, which is based on occupational therapy, pediatric occupational therapy. So it's underpinned by that. But it's essentially about getting children outdoors, active, moving their bodies in different ways and developing really important skills, not just for school, but for life as well. So we do nature kindy, we do play groups, and we also do school holiday programs for the older children too. And then this year, the beginning of this year, we started an out of school hours care program. So we've got lots of things on the go, I guess. We develop a lot of resources that support educators. So we're obviously very educator focused. But when the opportunity came up to contribute to this amazing book, Women Changing the World book, we felt like we had a story to share, and something that wasn't just designed to resonate with educators, but actually to resonate with business women in particular. And I think that came about because we do things a little bit different in our business. So while it started out just the two of us, and it was just the two of us for a little while, we worked out of a portable little file box that we'd shuffle between the two houses, between Tasha's house and mine. We didn't have an office. We just worked when we could work around our existing work commitments and our family commitments and all of those sorts of things. I suppose it was probably what is now referred to as a side hustle. We didn't call it that back in the day. It was just one of those things that we did. And when we started that, it was just us. In some ways, it was easy, and we talk about that a little bit now. It was so easy when it was just the two of us. But what's happened, obviously, over the years is that our business has grown, and we've brought on more people within our team. Also, within that growth, we've also had more children of our own and changed our own family dynamics. And that's really impacted on the way we do business as well. So our kind of involvement, I guess, in this book is really from that lens of what we do as business owners impacts on children. And often that happens quite directly through the way that we work with our team, the people that we employ, but also with our clients and, all kind of number of things. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today and about what businesses can actually do to make a difference for children and how that will go on to change the world. So our business motto is "We are changing the world for children." So again, this felt like a really good fit. We often say that it sounds like a pretty bold statement to say, we are changing the world for children, but that's ultimately what we want to do. We want to make a difference in the world for children. We might not be able to fix every problem. We might not be able to dismantle the education system, but there are a lot of things that we can do, a lot of changes that we can make. And our business name, Inspired EC, actually came about because we wanted people to feel inspired. That's ultimately what we wanted. We wanted people to be inspired, to do better, to be better. And that in turn goes on to make a big difference in the world. All right, so let's flick through a little bit. So why does it matter to change the world for children? There might be those sorts of questions. I don't have children, so why does this matter to me? My business has nothing to do with children. Why does this matter to me? It matters. Everything that we do is changing the world and shaping the world for children, whether it's our action or inaction around climate change, whether it's, choices that we make politically, or whether it's, just decisions about how we live our everyday life, it impacts on future generations, it impacts on the current generation. And those people are going to be our change makers. They're going to be the people that down the track will make change and will continue what we do. Because I like to think that we're not, we are changing the world, but it won't just be changed and then it's done. It's an evolution. It should continue to change and continue to grow. So if we don't support children and we don't really put a focus into the early years, then that change is going to stop. We're going to run out of people who want to make change, who want to make the world a better place, who want to, come in with creative ideas and, those sorts of things. So there's a lot of research around that says about the importance of investing in childhood, particularly in the first 5 years. There's a lot of kind of statistics and all of those sorts of things, but essentially Australia just doesn't stack up when it comes to how we invest in early childhood. So we as a culture need to shift that, need to ensure that people understand just how important those early years are. A child's learning doesn't start the minute they get to school. It starts when they're born. It starts before they're born. So it's really vital for us that we get that message out there that these first 5 years are so vital to everything that we do. All right. So I want you to have a look at that image and think about what you see when you see that image. Now, we show this image a lot when we do training with early childhood services, and most of the responses that we get are that it's like a piece of art and something you might see in an art gallery, one of those kind of triptych kind of designs. But essentially, you'll notice there are differences between each of those. And ultimately, what we're looking at is a representation of the brain. So you'll notice we've got, on the far side, we've got the newborn brain, and you'll see that there are lots of connections happening in the brain, but, it's kind of just emerging. And so that's what's happening. Even before children are born, there's connections happening, being made in the brain. So that's what each of these little kind of black lines represents, the connections or synapses that are occurring in the brain. Then we've got 1 month. So when we move along to the next one, we've got, this is what the brain looks like at about the age of 1 month. And so you'll notice that there's more connections. We've got more and more connections being added all the time. By the age of 9 months, we've got even more connections again. You'll notice that some of those connections are getting stronger, as you can see by the darker lines. And then the one that I probably find the most fascinating is this 2-year-old brain. And the reason I find it fascinating is because I feel like it's a great representation of 2-year-olds. There is so much going on for 2-year-olds. They tend to be, often perceived as being a little all over the place. They're often full of energy and, really highly charged. And that can be challenging for us as, adults to kind of be a part of. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go on. But you'll notice that there is so much going on in the brain there. Then at the end, we've got the adult brain. And what I find really interesting is between the 2-year-old brain and the adult brain, we see a big drop-off in those neurological pathways. So those connections have dropped off. We've gotten rid of things that we don't actually need. And there's a lot of science and research around that, which talks about the pruning that our brain does with the things that it doesn't need anymore. But it also, you'll see that a lot of the connections are a lot stronger. So they're the things that we've done over and over again that have become embedded in our brain. They're the things that just are a natural part of life. And so we've got really strong connections. That often happens when we repeat things. You'll find even, say, driving a car, for example. I always find that a good example for adults. Most adults can relate to that. The first time you get in to drive a car, your brain has to do a lot. It has to think about, where am I putting my feet? Where am I putting my hands? What am I doing with this gear stick? In what order do I do things? How do I keep an eye on the traffic that's behind me, in front of me, off to the side? Keep an eye on the traffic lights, make sure I'm aware of the signage. There's so much going on. And while I don't like to say that we get to a point where we drive on autopilot, we kind of do. Often it's a very random thing probably to admit, but often when I'm driving, I have this moment of recognizing the gravity of what's happening, the gravity of me controlling this, ton of metal. And I'm in charge of that. And the things that I do with my hands are making that work or not work. The things that I do with my feet are making me go or stop. There's so much kind of control, and yet I don't actually have to actively be thinking, what next? What next? Because my brain has done that so many times and my body has done that so many times. And there's a really strong connection between what happens in the body and what happens in the brain. I think we get to that point where the connections are so much stronger that we don't actually need to put as much kind of energy in it. But I think this is just a really great representation, particularly for you to see in that birth to 2 years, just how much brain development is taking place. That in itself tells us just how important this time is. If our brain is doing so much and learning so much and taking so much in, then we know that this is an important time. All right, so you'll notice that I've said birth to 2, and the reason I've said that is because often people say 0 to 2. We don't like to talk in zeros because no one's ever a 0. We're born, so we're birth to 2. And these are some of the key things that we like to share with people about children in that birth to 2 stage. So connection is vital in this stage. So a deep primary caregiving connection is vital for development. Infants really, really need us. And anyone who has infants or has had infants will know that to be true. You spend a lot of time with them, on your lap, in your arms, in a carrier, feeding, whatever it happens to be. You spend a lot of time quite attached to infants, and they actually need it. It's vital for their brain development. It's vital for their physical development. It's vital for them to feel secure. There are so many reasons why children need that connection and why adults need that connection. We're actually designed to be connected. I read a quote the other day, and I've seen many before that follow the same lines, and it's essentially about the number of containers and things that we use for infants. So we put them in high chairs, and we put them in prams, and we put them in car seats, and we put them in, bouncers, and we put them in rockers, and, all of those sorts of things. Now, don't get me wrong, some of those are really important. They can be important for our mental health and well-being, because sometimes you just can't have somebody attached to you any longer. So they're important in that capacity. But they're also important from a safety perspective. We obviously want children in car seats, keeps them safe. But ultimately, it talks about how children have that need to be connected to us, and how we just expect that they'll, sit in those containers or stay in those things and be quite content with that. And some infants will be, but a lot won't be. They just need to be with us. So the carrier that you see in this picture is very similar to what I had with my children. And I actually worked with my children in a carrier. I delivered training sessions with my youngest in a carrier because I needed to go and do the thing that I needed to do. My infant needed to be with me. And so I set that standard that it was okay to do that. I spoke to our client about that and said, just so you know, and look, we're lucky, we work with early childhood people, so they're quite comfortable with infants and toddlers being around. But that was important to me, that she was able to be with me when she needed me. She slept through about 95% of the 2-hour session, and then woke up, and then everybody was clamoring for a nurse. And so, it turned out to be quite a fine way to do it. But it meant that she had that connection that she needed. And for me, as a woman who wanted to get back to work, who wanted to be able to contribute creatively, who wanted to be able to share what I do, but also stay connected to my baby, that was a really important thing for me. And we'll sort of talk about it too, but ultimately for us as a business, and this is where I think it's so relevant for businesses, having our team and our staff be able to feel connected to their children while working for us. Obviously, we're invested in that because we work in that space. But I think there are lessons there to be learnt for a lot of professions. And I think probably one of the benefits, I guess, of COVID is that with so many more people working from home, working remotely, having to juggle homeschooling, children not being in childcare, or all of those sorts of things, I think for a lot of employers and for a lot of employees, we started to see that actually we're real human people who have real human responsibilities, real human connections, and those actually need to be kind of nurtured, I suppose. So that was a really important thing for us in our business. We have babies in our office quite a bit, as you'll see at the end of this session. So the next thing I think that we like people to know is that the first 1,000 days are really important. So Nathan Wallace is a wonderful parent educator and researcher based in New Zealand. If you ever have the chance to hear him speak, I highly recommend it. But he talks a lot about brain development and how important those first 1,000 days are in a child's life for developing the brain. So one of the things that he says is that what we've learned is that the human brain is basically designed to data gather in a way in those first 1,000 days of its existence. So that's what the human brain is doing. It's collecting data and information during that time. Now, I've put down there scans of the criminal brain. That'll probably make no sense whatsoever, but essentially there has been some research done that shows that brains in people who had gone on to be criminals and done some pretty horrible things, the parts of the brain that really were struggling when they did brain scans, or that were missing, or that there wasn't those strong connections, were actually the parts around love and nurture. And so it's really important, not that that's to place the blame on people for not being loving and nurturing to their children and making them criminals, but it just really highlights that need for that. And it doesn't mean that we can't get that back either. I remember at the session that I attended with Nathan Wallace that someone actually went, "Oh my gosh, I've mucked up my children. I haven't given them that enough. They're going to be doomed for life." And he said, "No one's ever doomed. There are plenty of things, the brain's always regenerating. It's very, very moldable." And so I think it's important that we remember that too. And probably the last thing for infants is that it's less about toys and more about time. So there's less focus on things that flash and spin and pop up and entertain children, and more time spent connecting, communicating, and actually being with children. When it comes to our 2 to 3 year olds, again, connection counts. It's really about those relationships, having understanding and empathy, having that secure attachment and a safe space for big feelings. And this really leads us into the next part, which is probably where most people sit with toddlers. And, it's a very typical attitude that we hear in our society, the terrible twos, or the three-nagers. There's, a few of those sorts of things. And while most people say it in jest, there does tend to be an attitude that, children are notoriously difficult at this age. And having had particularly one of my children as a toddler, who's also a very strong personality, I definitely felt that. I definitely felt that, oh my gosh, it's the terrible twos. But it was actually about me having realistic expectations. They have a highly active brain, as we know in that image that we saw at the beginning. They're really learning to communicate. So they're working on all of their skills, their expressive language, all of those sorts of things. So that's all still being worked on. So they tend to be a little bit challenging at that age. But it's remembering that they're not terrible. It's just us having realistic expectations. And then the next part's about keeping play simple. So toddlers really rely on really simple play. There's a great concept known as play schema or schematic play, which is essentially, and you'll recognise a lot of that, even if you don't work in early childhood and you've had nothing to do with children, you would recognise that. And it's, children filling and emptying things. So it might be that one of the great ones is when toddlers find, an old handbag or something and they stuff all of their blocks into it. It's transporting, where they will put things into a bucket and take them somewhere else and dump them out. And, there's lots and lots of different schema. But it's essentially really basic play, and it's really important for development. Toddlers need to get outside a lot. They're very active. They need to have their curiosity sparked, and being outside is really great for that. So 3 to 5 year olds, play matters. So Peter Gray is a psychologist based in the US. We've been fortunate enough to bring Peter out to Australia to speak on several occasions now. And his work is phenomenal. He writes a really wonderful book called Free to Learn, which you can find on our website. I'll give you that at the end if you like, but it's a brilliant book. And he really talks about, he's got a great article on a website called Psychology Today, which talks about his definition of play and how we actually define what play is. And ultimately, the key elements tend to be that it's freely chosen. So children actually choose to do what they do, that they're free to quit, so they can stop playing whenever they want to play. And there's 5 sort of parameters around play that Peter talks about and unpacks in the article. So I'd highly recommend that if you're interested in play. So play builds the brain. It really strengthens those connections that we saw in that initial image. So it's helping to build those. There's lots of repetition in play. There's lots of freedom of choice. There's lots of decision making. There's lots of social interaction. And it gives children a chance to practice skills. It's important that we stop the downward push of academics into those early years. That 3 to 5 can be tempting to say, hey, we need to teach them to read, and we need to provide this for them, and all of those sorts of things. But the research shows that earlier isn't better, and it actually shows that a child who learns to read early, for example, doesn't necessarily follow that same trajectory throughout. So they might be reading at 4, and they may get to 10 and be reading at the exact same level as other 10-year-olds who weren't reading until they were 7, which is about the time that's expected by a lot of research for children to be ready to read. Benefits of nature and outdoor play. So this is a really important one for us. We're outdoor kind of people. We spend a lot of time outside with children. As I said at the beginning, we do a lot of nature play programs. And so being outdoors gives children a chance to practice resilience, and that's really important when we're talking about children who are going to go on to be change makers, children who are going to make a difference in the world. We want them to be resilient, because we all know that trying to do anything big, trying to do anything important, trying to do anything that matters comes with failure at times, and it comes with setbacks, and it comes with challenges. And we need to be able to bounce back from those. So giving children the opportunity to develop those skills of resilience early on enables them to do that as they're older. They become adults who are a lot more resilient as well. They're also developing, their physical skills, risk-taking dispositions, and also there's sensory benefits outdoors too. So there's lots of benefits, from the core through to, our sense of balance, through to just our general kind of awareness of the world and connection to the planet. All right, so what does this all mean, and why is it important for women and people in business? Why is it important for the bigger world? Well, I think the important thing is that when we put energy and time into children and into childhood, we're actually investing in our future mamas and papas. We're investing in children who will go on to have children of their own. We're investing in that future, that progression. So, it's a solid investment. That's where we will actually see results, investing in childhood. We're investing in our future leaders. So, these are the people that are going to be in politics. And we all know that can do with a shake-up. So we want to ensure that the early years experiences that these children have set them up for a life of leadership, a life where they're comfortable, voicing their opinions, a life where they're comfortable sharing ideas, being creative, thinking in a different way. We're investing in our community and culture. There's research that talks about for every $1 spent on a child, in their early years, it saves so many dollars as an adult on, time spent in the justice system and rehabilitation programs and, all those sorts of more challenging things that happen within our community. So we're actually investing in our community and culture when we spend time thinking about children and childhood. And we're investing in change makers. So as I said before, these are the people who are going to make a difference in the world. They're going to continue that on. So while we might be trying to make a difference, we're also trying to support others to go on to make a difference too. So it's that kind of ongoing cycle. So what can you do? So there's lots of things I think that people can do. Lots of practical things, lots of conceptual things, I guess. And some of those are pretty simple. So being kind to the planet makes a big difference for children. So when we actually take care of the earth that we live on, we make a difference for future generations. That's changing the world. And that's really simple things. It might be reducing our consumption. It might be cutting the waste that we have. It might be, investing in renewable energy. It might be, reducing our water. It might be, there's all sorts of things that we can do. But being kind to the planet doesn't just help us now, it helps the future. So we want to make sure that we're doing that. And we can do that in our businesses. Our business has recently implemented a sustainability action group with several of our team. So we've got probably, in terms of permanent, part-time and flexible kind of staff, we've got about 20 to 25 staff. So we've sort of got a couple from each area of our business, and they're working together to look at different ways that our business can be more sustainable and can make a difference in the world. So that's just one element of what we're doing, and I think what every business can do. It doesn't mean that we change everything overnight, but we can change some things, and some things are really simple changes. We rang and ordered a box that gets delivered and picked up and recycles our toner cartridges from our enormous printer. It took us probably 10 minutes to organise and makes a really big difference because those are no longer going in the bin. Really, really simple. And I don't know why we hadn't done it earlier. But those little changes can make a big difference. Make your business culture family friendly. Now, this will look different in every business, and it will be a work in progress in every business. For us, it's looked like bring your child to work with you. And that probably started, well, it definitely started when both mine and Tasha's boys were probably about 3, I suppose, and we started taking them with us to different things. Actually, it probably started before that when Tash was heavily pregnant and planting plants at a preschool playground that we were working on. So she was about 40 weeks pregnant and planting like hundreds of plants. Whether that was helpful or not for her, I'm not sure, but she was there, she was able to do it. But we always like to make our events family friendly. So when we have conferences and events, we're more than happy for people who are still breastfeeding or got little babies to bring them along. It's really not a big issue. My own children have been to several conferences as babies. I tend to not take them as they get a bit older because they lose a bit of interest. Not as exciting for them and not as fun for me. But when they're littler and they still have that need, that connection, again, as I say, I've worn my baby in a carrier quite a bit. But we also make our office family friendly. So we currently have 2 babies that come into the office every week on different days. And we've got a cot set up in a small office. There's a cot, there's a mat, there's some toys that can get moved around wherever they need to be, just some basic blocks and, simple things that they can play with. There's cardboard boxes and, those sorts of real basics. But it's knowing that those staff can actually bring their babies to work with them and not have to put them in care. And again, there's nothing wrong with putting them in care. That's our bread and butter, is people who work in childcare settings. So we have no issues with that, but it needs to be a choice that people can make for themselves. So if you're not comfortable yet to put your child in care, then there's a way for you to bring them with you. We also offer flexible working conditions. And I think, again, COVID's really taught us that We were already doing flexible work arrangements, but I know for a lot of businesses it really showed that anything's possible. You can actually work from home. And it's not about necessarily the hours that people work. We recognise that people are trying to work around their children. So working 9 to 5 doesn't really work for most of our team. So some of our teams start far earlier in the morning. I myself often do things really early in the morning. Tash often does things late at night because we work around what's good for our family. We encourage our team to do the same. If there's someone's got a sports carnival on or whatever, shuffle your work days around. For us, it's not about ticking the box that actually, yes, I was present at the office for these hours, because you can have people present, but they're not necessarily committing to the work. They're not necessarily getting it all done. Whereas I think when you show that you're more flexible, then you actually see a big difference in the way people work. I know for our team, our team are generally more committed to their work because we've committed to them. So it's about being family friendly. Does it always work? No. There are some times when it doesn't work real well. Sometimes when we've ended up with several babies in the office and someone's crying, and then another team member brought their dog with them, which is, again, being family friendly because their fur baby is important to them. So the dog came in, so the dog was barking because the baby was crying, and things are a little bit chaotic. But I think the benefits for us far outweigh the challenges or the challenging days that we have. So I think that's important. That makes a difference for children by being family friendly. It means that those children have that connection with their family. They have mum or dad or whoever at home, or they have them available to them more often. They have them able to come to their events. And again, that just feeds into that cycle and makes that difference on an ongoing basis. Being an advocate for children, so speaking up for children, actually sharing that importance of childhood. I can always remember when I was younger, it was like a common sentiment, I think, amongst like my grandparents, and what about children should be seen and not heard. And it was one of those really kind of glib things I think that was said, but I think there was an element of that, and I think we're starting to see that that's actually not the case. Children have a lot to offer. You only have to look at children who are making a difference in the world to know that by us investing in them, they're making a difference and doing amazing things. When we trust that children are capable and we trust their knowledge and all of those sorts of things, and we actually say, you know what, these children have got it. They can do it. Childhood's important. Let's, commit to that. Then we see big things. You see children who, there was, I know I watched with my son the War on Waste documentary series on the ABC, and there's a young girl on there who started the Straw No More campaign, and there's a lot of adults that aren't doing stuff like that, and yet someone actually was an advocate for her and being able to say, you know what, yeah, you can do it, and yes, children are capable, and I'll support you. And I think that's a big part of what it is, and that's how we start to make a difference. Contributing products and ideas to the world that support children's wellbeing. So, that's one of the ways that we can make a difference as business owners to the world, is by actually contributing things that support children. So that might be, obviously that's very much tied up in the work that we do, but it might be that you create a product or a service or an idea or a way of working or a way of doing that actually supports children and supports families. And so this is how we do it. So this is kind of our office and our work life. And we've got, you'll see out there, we've got babies in the office. We've got our nature-based program where we take children, our own children. That's my daughter, and I'll often go down in the school holidays and run our nature-based program, as will Tash. And we get to take our own children and spend time with them outdoors as well. There's my baby at a conference up in the top corner, Tash wearing one of my babies in a baby carrier, one of my children meditating, one of Tash's children attending a conference with her. We've really committed to making our workplace family friendly but child centered. So it's not just about making it easier on the parents, but also about what's good for the children too. So it's, while it might be helpful for me to be able to work with, my children at home during homeschooling, I was able to do all of that. I also needed to be able to shuffle my hours around so that I could give them my attention that they needed and that they deserve. So it's about being flexible, and having fun with it too. It's like childhood's an amazing time. And I think when, particularly as business owners, when we can recognize that, and see how important that is for, particularly for women, but for all families, for dads too, like there's a lot of dads who would love that flexibility and, being able to work around their children and with their children and, sort of see that value in that. So that's how we kind of value the early years, I suppose, in what we do. As I say, so much of what we do is tied up in the early years, so it's easy for us to talk about how important it is. But our thing is really about supporting others, the general public and businesses, to see how important it is to invest in those early years and what that will do for future generations and how that's going to have an impact and change the world. So I've just popped my details and Tash's details up there. You can find us on all the social places. You can email us if you've got any questions. I hope that you found it interesting, whether you're, as I say, a parent or you're a business owner or you're none of those things, but thinking, gee, I want to make a difference. Then I think starting with childhood is probably one of the most logical places to start.
Thank you so much, Nicole.
No worries at all.
It sounds like such a beautiful centre that you've created, such a beautiful space for children.
Yeah, and I think it's been, I think for us, it's been about creating, a diversity of programs too that, offer different things in different places and allow our team to work really flexibly and, to fit their own children in with that. And some of the programs that we created, our nature-based program that we run, part of the impetus and, the drive to actually get that up and running was that we wanted somewhere like that for our children. So it was like, that should be a driver. I think when you can see that that's going to make a difference for your own children, then it's going to make a difference overall as well, I think.
Yeah, and I really love your holistic philosophy around sustainability. You're running the nature-based programs for the children, but you're also doing things within the business, like getting the toners picked up and things like that.
So such a simple thing, but it's, and they are little changes, but I think, you need to be able to kind of walk the talk a little bit too. You want to say, hey, let's change the world for children, then actually let's stop putting toner cartridges into landfill. Like if we can do something about that, then let's do it. And sometimes those decisions are not always easy, they're not always the easiest path. It's much easier to just chuck it in the big landfill bin that comes and gets picked up than to organise to do it a different way. But I think when you can see that it does make a difference, and for us, we can actually see those little people coming every day and going and playing down in the mud, and we can see the people that it's making a difference for, then I think it's easier to make those choices.
Yeah, absolutely. And what inspired you to start this, to get involved with this?
I think for us originally it was that, so we'd worked in an early childhood centre together for a couple of years, and every training opportunity that came up seemed to be the same. It was just the same things year after year, and we said we want something different. Like we just want different things, and who would we want to listen to? And that was kind of really what started it. We want to get this person to come and speak, and so we started sort of doing that. We'd also at the same time, because we started the service that we were at had been very traditional, in that it was very traditional preschool. It had lots of the plastic toys and the super safe outdoor environment and whatever, and we actually made a lot of change there, and so we're doing things very differently. Tash actually designed a river that's still at the service now, 10, 15 years later, but designed a river and that the children could actually get in and play and whatever. So we had people coming to us and saying, can you come and tell our team how we could do that? And so it just kind of naturally evolved. And then each of the things that we've added over the years has been because people have said, can you do this? And we'll say, okay, we'll do that. And it's just been those opportunities that have come up that we've gone, well, you know what, that's going to make a difference. That's going to support educators. That's going to support families. That's going to be great for children. All of those choices have been about, well, what's going to have impact? And sometimes those choices aren't always the best choices for us. There've been choices where we've gone, oh, we lost money on doing that project, or, whatever. It's not always been the best business decision, but we've always had to weigh up what's the ethical payoff and the feel good factor, the thing that we go, you know what, that's worth it. It's worth doing, even if it's not, it's not making us rich and famous, but it's worth doing. It's the things that they make you feel good and they make you feel like you're making a difference. So I guess that's kind of how it's all evolved and, why we do what we do.
Yeah. And I think sometimes those investments that you make, which are expensive at the time and don't bring an ROI at the time, that's what makes you different. That's what makes your centre so special. And that's what makes people want to work with you and give their children that kind of experience and environment.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, that being prepared to, we always talk a lot about the importance of children being able to take risks. And, we're all for someone being halfway up a tree or, learning to use woodworking tools or, all that sort of stuff. And it's like, well, if we're advocating for the children taking risks, then let's set that example and take some risks in what we do. And, sometimes they pay off and sometimes they don't necessarily pay off, but you learn something from it. And, and in that process, you learn things that, actually next time we do it this way and we'll have even more of an impact or, we'll make more of a difference. And I think that's probably the thing for us is just bring it back to, okay, if that didn't work, what did we learn out of it still? And what next? Where do we go after that?
Yeah, I love that. And I think as entrepreneurs, we all have to do that. We try things and sometimes they go really well and sometimes they're a failure, but we're always learning and reflecting on what we can do better for the future and next time.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole. It's been wonderful hearing from you. And people can contact you via your website.
Yep. So it's just inspiredec.com and they can get in touch with us there if there's any questions or anyone who's wanting to kind of, particularly if you're wanting to make your workplace or your business more family focused. I think, that's just been such a huge passion for us is really making sure that our team, and we do have a team that's predominantly women and predominantly mums. And so it's been about making that suitable for them. So anyone who wants to do that, more than happy to chat about it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks to everybody who's joined us watching live and everyone watching on the recording.